Remember Potiphar's wife, the crazy lady who begged Joseph for some sexy fun time and when he refused, got him locked in jail? Here's what happened. Joseph's life took a wild turn when his brother sold him into slavery and he found himself in Potiphar's home. With his undeniable charisma and talent, Joseph quickly rose to become Potiphar's trusted right-hand man. But in this high-stakes drama, Potiphar's wife decided to stir the pot. She was relentless, dropping flirtatious hints, bold advances, making it very clear she wanted him. And Joseph responded, "Hard pass. Can't do my guy Potiphar like that." But the madam had no concept of no means no. One day she found him alone, grabbed his cloak, and tried to make her move. Joseph wasn't about to get caught up in her crazy and fought his way out of his cloak and ran. Mad embarrassed, she accused him of coming on to her, and Potiphar threw him in jail. Her actions leave a cautionary tale of women who falsely accuse righteous men of unbecoming behavior and warn of the lies when someone comes forward. Which I guess is okay, but there's so much more going on. Potiphar was an Egyptian official, captain of the guard, in charge of the prison, and arguably a eunuch, which means castration, which means no sexy fun time. He also recognized God was with Joseph and put him in charge of everything, except his food, because dietary restrictions prevented any foreigners from preparing it. And the poor madam was feeling it. Potiphar had all this time on his hands, neglected his duties as a husband, and only concerned himself with food. And did I mention no sexy fun time? Because that's a major problem. Women were confined to the role of childbearer, specifically providing a male heir. Not having children was a sign of divine disfavor and a point of humiliation. But if Potiphar is lacking in the performance department, she had no hope for much of anything. But here was this young, good-looking slave favored by her husband that had risen to the second most prominent rank in her home. Potiphar may have neglected her needs, but this slave could fulfill them, which led her to gently coaxing and sweet-talking him daily until maybe he would do the deed. And sure, it could be that she just needed some good D. But in a time where contraception was practically non-existent and intercourse meant pregnancy, it's a safe bet that she probably wanted a child. Then there's this whole cloak situation. And it isn't the first time Joseph has gotten himself into hot water with a piece of clothing. Among the 12 brothers, Joseph was undeniably the favorite. Their father didn't even try to hide it. He gifted Joseph with a stunning, ornate robe that practically screamed favoritism. To make matters worse, Joseph kept having these outrageous dreams that he ruled over his siblings, and on top of that, their dad frequently used him as the family snitch. One day, they'd had enough. They ambushed Joseph, violently tore his prized robe, and sold him into slavery. To cover their tracks, they took his beautiful robe, shredded it, smeared it with blood, and presented it to their father as heartbreaking evidence of Joseph's supposed demise. Which is exactly what the madam did. She became overly angry that this slave would dare defy her, that she violently grabbed him by the cloak and used it as evidence against him. And what of Potiphar's reaction? He was handed hard evidence, and instead of castration or execution, Joseph was thrown into prison. Why? If Potiphar was a eunuch and could not produce an heir, he could have been involved in the madam's scheme. Because it's not uncommon that slaves were used as stand-ins where an heir needed to be produced. Think Hagar and Abraham or Bilhah and Jacob. And these kind of sexual interactions between the elite and their household servants were normal. And the accusation itself is questionable. The madam tells her other servants that he tried to lie with her, but told her husband that he came to insult her. It could be that after purchasing the good-looking Joseph, entrusting him to manage his household with virtually no restrictions, and creating an environment where Joseph could produce an heir for him, Potiphar expected this outcome. And when that didn't happen, he threw him in prison. Or it could be that Potiphar didn't believe his wife. She came to him with the accusation, implicating her husband since he brought this Hebrew slave into their home, and look what he tried to do. But it was no secret that she was trying to sleep with Joseph, with her constant flirting and his constant refusal. And in this one instance where no witnesses were present, she accuses him of something that was against his character. In this case, Potiphar burned with anger since he had to act. Doing nothing was not an option. And that would be the end of the story. Except Joseph's story is not linear, because between chapters 37 and 39, 38 is wild. Joseph's older brother Judah had 3 sons, Onan, and Shelah. He married off to Tamar, but was an evil little gremlin, so God zapped him out of existence. Judah told Onan to marry Tamar and have kids for but Onan wasn't keen on having children in Ur's name and treated the whole affair like a really bad game of pull and pray. And his pull-out game was so strong, he angered God, so he got zapped too. With only Shelah left, Judah told Tamar, go live as a widow with your father until Shelah grows up, which was really Judah speak for, please don't kill my last child. Time passed, and Tamar realized Judah wasn't gonna keep his promise, so she decided to take matters into her own hands. She heard Judah was coming into town and disguised herself as a prostitute and waited for him to cross her path. How much for your, services, beautiful mysterious lady? 1 young goat. But since you're fresh out of goats, how about your seal cord and staff as a down payment? Deal. Tamar ends up pregnant, is brought to Judah to be burned at the stake, but lo and behold, she proves he's the father and is deemed more righteous than Judah. What the heck is going on here? We have similar stories of foreign women seducing major patriarchal figures and bound to a culture where producing a male heir is their only viable prospect. Yet one is deemed righteous and the other a harlot. Why? We could look to the Torah and the levirate marriage. If a man died without leaving any children, his brother was expected to marry the widow and produce offspring to continue the deceased brother's lineage, which explains why God was so angered by Onan's decision to pull out. Now, the madam may be childless, but she's not a widow, nor is she within the laws of Israel. Tamar would be justified in her actions to secure a male heir, while the madam is deemed an adulteress. But incest is also a sin, and though Tamar's deception led to the continuation of her late husband's name, her father-in-law was the father. So perhaps the righteousness of Tamar and the vilification of the madam isn't the main point. Judah refused to marry Tamar to Shelah as a kinsman redeemer. Then he unknowingly solicits her services when presented with the opportunity. But Joseph was coaxed day after day, facing constant workplace harassment with a woman who desperately wanted some extracurricular activities, and he refused. Judah lost his birthright for his sin. Joseph gained his birthright for his righteous, steadfast faithfulness even in the midst of temptation. But even still, there's the greater story of God's presence. The Lord was with Joseph was mentioned twice in the beginning and twice in the end. Repetition is key, and when something is repeated, we should be paying attention. He was with Joseph at his lowest. He was with him in the temptation. He was with him when he was sent to prison. And because the Lord was with him, he was successful. In Potiphar's home, he rose from enslaved to second in command. In prison, he rose from prisoner to a major role of responsibility. He interpreted the prisoner's dreams and gave credit to God. He was sent to Pharaoh and admitted he could not interpret his dreams, but God would give him the answers. And Pharaoh made him the second most powerful person in the nation. This small blip in the story of Joseph is part of the larger piece of God's glory. So is the story of Joseph and the madam about a promiscuous woman falsely accusing a righteous man of unsightly behavior towards her? Sure, because there's no excuse for a wealthy, powerful woman using her position to use and abuse a man for her own gratification. But gaps in ambiguity leave plenty of room for interpretation.